Blood spills, vice cells, and censors are knocking down doors. The 1950s gave birth to films so shocking, theaters were raided and reels confiscated. But what exactly made these movies too hot to handle? Which one put its creator on an FBI watch list? Let's dive into the underbelly of cinema most people don't know existed. Glenn or Glenda, 1953. Ed Wood's debut film shocked 1950s America with something unthinkable: compassion for transgender individuals. This fever dream of a movie follows Glenn, a crossdresser desperately hiding his true self from his fiancée. Wood personally knew the struggle, often wearing Angora sweaters under his Marine uniform during World War II. The film's bizarre production came together when producer George Weiss tried to cash in on Christine Jorgensen's headline-making gender reassignment surgery. When Jorgensen refused to participate, Wood convinced Weiss he was perfect to direct because of his own cross-dressing experiences. Shot in just 4 days on a microscopic budget, it features Bela Lugosi as a cryptic narrator rambling about green dragons and puppy dog tales, while stock footage of buffalo stampedes plays randomly. Banned in multiple cities and condemned by religious groups, the film somehow persisted. Critics eviscerated it, calling it impassioned and incoherent with weirdo homilies and rotten acting. Yet today, film scholars recognize its groundbreaking portrayal of gender nonconformity decades before such discussions entered mainstream consciousness. In a time when being different meant being dangerous, Wood dared to ask for understanding. The Moon is Blue, 1953. Otto Preminger's romantic comedy doesn't seem scandalous today, but in 1953 it was cinematic dynamite. Why? Because it dared to use words like virgin, pregnant, and seduce in its dialogue. The film follows a young woman who meets 2 men in the Empire State Building and plays them against each other, all while boldly discussing her virginity. The production defied Hollywood's strict production code, refusing to remove the forbidden words. When the film was denied approval, United Artists took the unprecedented step of releasing it anyway without the production code seal, the first major studio to do so. The Catholic Legion of Decency immediately condemned it, triggering bans in Boston, parts of Ohio, and Maryland. Despite the controversy, or perhaps because of it, the film became a box office smash, earning $6 million. Critics were divided, but audiences flocked to theaters, making it a watershed moment in breaking Hollywood censorship. The controversy even reached the Supreme Court, which ruled in Preminger's favor, dealing the first major blow to America's film censorship apparatus. Mom and Dad, 1945 to 1959. Though technically made in 1945, this sex education shocker continued playing to packed houses throughout the 1950s, becoming possibly the most financially successful exploitation film of all time. The film tells the cautionary tale of a high school girl who gets pregnant after a brief fling with a pilot who later dies in a plane crash. Producer Kroger Babb turned film distribution into a carnival sideshow. He hired fake hygiene commentators named Elliot Forbes to give pseudo-medical lectures before screenings, and separate showings were held for men and women. At strategic moments, the film cuts to actual footage of childbirth and venereal disease, shocking material that had audiences gasping and sometimes fainting. The National Legion of Decency condemned it, and local authorities frequently raided theaters. Yet the controversy only fueled its success. The film grossed an estimated $100 million, billions in today's dollars, on a tiny $65,000 budget, playing continuously in roadshow format into the 1970s. The Library of Congress later selected it for preservation in the National Film Registry as culturally significant, recognizing how it slyly circumvented censorship under the guise of education. Jailbait, 1954. Another Ed Wood special, this crime drama about a plastic surgeon forced to alter a criminal's face, seems tame compared to today's standards. But its undercurrent of violence, implied criminal sexuality, and Wood's trademark baffling narrative choices made censors nervous. The film stars Steve Reeves and features an extended, completely irrelevant blackface minstrel show sequence that's as shocking for its racism as its inexplicable inclusion. Wood struggled to finance the film, reportedly using money from Baptist church members who thought they were funding religious content. When they discovered the actual subject matter, they were horrified. Banned in several southern states for moral turpitude and in parts of the Midwest for its criminal themes, the film vanished from circulation for decades. Today, it's studied as an example of how even B-movies reflected America's racial and sexual anxieties during the conformist 1950s. Film historian Danny Peary later called it Wood's only marginally competent film, which counts as high praise given his infamous reputation. Untamed Youth, 1957. When you mix juvenile delinquency, prison labor camps, and rock and roll, you get this explosive cocktail of a film. Mamie Van Doren stars as a young woman sentenced to work on a cotton farm for the crime of skinny dipping. There, she discovers corrupt officials forcing young inmates to work in brutal conditions. The film hit every 1950s panic button: youth rebellion, rock music, sexual freedom, and corruption of authority figures. The National Legion of Decency condemned it for low moral tone, while censors in Georgia, Ohio, and Maryland banned it outright. What particularly outraged authorities was a scene where inmates danced provocatively in the cotton fields while singing rock music, combining sexuality, race, and youth rebellion in one radioactive package. Despite the bans, or more likely because of them, the film became a drive-in hit. Eddie Cochran's musical performances made it a favorite among rebellious teens who snuck into screenings. Director Howard W. Koch later claimed the film was secretly championing youth rights against corrupt adult authority, making it an unlikely piece of cultural resistance disguised as exploitation. High School Hellcats, 1958. Teen girl gangs terrorizing American high schools. The film follows a new student who gets forced to join a dangerous all-girl gang, witnessing their crime spree firsthand. Producer Samuel Z. Arkoff specifically targeted the growing teen audience, knowing their parents' disapproval would only boost ticket sales. The film portrays female juvenile delinquents as ruthless predators, showing them drinking, smoking, and engaging in violence, behaviors considered unthinkable for proper young women. One sequence where gang members corner a teacher in a classroom had school boards across America calling for its ban. Several cities, including Detroit and Memphis, obliged. Critics savaged it. Variety called it moral sewage, but teens made it a hit. The film played continuously on the drive-in circuit for years, despite its reputation. Today, feminist film scholars point to High School Hellcats as an early, if problematic, depiction of female rebellion against 1950s gender conformity, showing young women claiming power in a society that offered them little. The Violent Years, 1956. What happens when you combine Ed Wood's screenplay with female juvenile delinquents? This astonishing time capsule of 1950s fears. The film follows Paula, a wealthy teenager who leads an all-girl gang on armed robberies, assault sprees, and property destruction, all while her neglectful parents remain oblivious. The most notorious scene, which got the film banned in several states, shows the girl gang sexually assaulting a male victim, gender-flipping the typical exploitation narrative in a way that shocked 1950s audiences. Later, Paula dies during childbirth, and a judge declares her baby will become a ward of the state because Paula's parents are unfit. Condemned by the Legion of Decency and banned in multiple cities, the film nonetheless found its audience. It perfectly captured Cold War anxieties about juvenile delinquency and the breakdown of the American family. Wood's script is surprisingly critical of parents who pursue wealth and status while neglecting their children's moral development. An unexpected social commentary from a filmmaker better known for Flying Saucers on Strings. The Creature from the Black Lagoon, 1954. A monster movie that seems tame by today's standards, but its sexual undertones got it banned in several southern states and heavily cut elsewhere. The film follows scientists who discover a prehistoric amphibian man who becomes obsessed with the expedition's only female member, Julie Adams. The infamous swimming sequence, where the creature swims beneath an unaware Adams in a white bathing suit, was considered unbearably erotic by 1950s standards. The visual metaphor of a monster pursuing a white woman triggered racial censorship in southern states, where officials claimed it would inflame tensions. Released in 3D, the film drew additional controversy for scenes where the creature reaches toward the audience, which some religious groups claimed was removing the natural barrier between evil and the viewer. Despite the bans, it became Universal's most profitable film of the decade and spawned 2 sequels. Today, film scholars recognize it as a groundbreaking work that used the monster movie format to explore forbidden desires and societal fears. Reform Schoolgirl, 1957. This women-in-prison exploitation film pushed boundaries with its portrayal of a teenage girl sent to a brutal reformatory after being framed for manslaughter. Inside, she faces sadistic guards, corrupt administrators, and violent fellow inmates. The film was shot in just 6 days on a minuscule budget. Producer Samuel Z. Arkoff deliberately included scenes of girls showering, fighting, and being physically punished to guarantee controversy and ticket sales. Several scenes were so explicit for the time that projectionists in the Midwest were arrested for showing them. Kansas and Ohio banned the film entirely after church groups organized protests outside theaters. Despite its exploitative elements, the film contained surprisingly progressive criticism of juvenile justice systems, showing how they often created criminals rather than rehabilitating troubled youth. This dual nature, combining legitimate social commentary with titillating content, became a hallmark of exploitation cinema. Film critic Pauline Kael later noted it was trash with a purpose, using sensationalism to expose real issues mainstream Hollywood wouldn't touch. Racket Girls, 1951. Female wrestling meets organized crime in this bizarre exploitation film following gangsters who use a women's wrestling promotion as a front for bookmaking and prostitution. The film features actual professional women wrestlers performing extended matches that have little to do with the paper-thin plot. Producer George Weiss specifically designed the film to showcase women in revealing outfits engaging in physical combat, a concept so controversial in 1951 that theaters showing it were raided in Philadelphia, Detroit, and Chicago. Authorities claimed the wrestling sequences were designed to appeal to viewers' prurient interests rather than sports fans. Despite, or because of the controversy, the film played continuously in grindhouse theaters throughout the 1950s. Today, it's recognized for its historical significance in featuring actual female athletes performing their sport, even as it exploited them for titillation. The film captures a strange moment when women's physical strength was simultaneously showcased and objectified, reflecting America's conflicted views on female empowerment. Gun Girls, 1957. Teen girls with firearms proved too much for 1950s censors to handle. This crime drama follows young women who embark on a spree of armed robberies and burglaries, repeatedly outsmarting male police officers. The film opens with a young woman shooting a store clerk point blank, setting its violent tone immediately. Director Robert C. D'Urtano based the screenplay on his novel Girls on Parole, but added considerably more violence and suggestive content for the film version. Multiple scenes showing young women handling guns in suggestive ways were cut by censors in various states, while the Catholic Legion of Decency condemned it entirely. Boston banned it outright after a reported incident where teen girls attempted a robbery, allegedly inspired by the film. Despite the censorship, Gun Girls found its audience through independent theaters and drive-ins where enforcement was lax. The film tapped into growing concerns about female independence in the post-war period, when many women who had entered the workforce during World War II resisted returning to purely domestic roles. By portraying violent female criminals, the film simultaneously exploited and reflected genuine social anxieties about changing gender roles. Chained for Life, 1952. Exploitation cinema reached a new low or high, depending on your perspective, with this film starring real-life conjoined twins Daisy and Violet Hilton. The story follows conjoined twins where one sister murders her husband's lover, creating the moral dilemma: how can you imprison one twin when the other is innocent? The film's production was ethically questionable from the start. The Hilton sisters, who had previously appeared in Todd Browning's controversial Freaks in 1932, took the role out of financial desperation after vaudeville's decline. Producer Roy Barcroft explicitly marketed the film as a real-life freak show, with posters asking, "What happens when one twin wants a man?" Banned in the UK and several US states for exploitation of the disabled, the film nonetheless played continuously on the grindhouse circuit. The Hiltons later expressed regret about their participation. Modern disability rights activists point to Chained for Life as an example of cinema's dehumanizing treatment of differently abled performers, while exploitation film historians consider it a historically significant, if deeply troubling artifact of cinema's complex relationship with human difference. She Shoulda Said No. 1949. Though released in 1949, this anti-marijuana film continued playing throughout the 1950s under various titles, including Wild Weed and The Devil's Weed. The film follows a young woman whose marijuana use leads to a downward spiral of addiction, promiscuity, and criminal behavior. What made the film particularly controversial was its star, Lila Leeds, who had been arrested for marijuana possession alongside Robert Mitchum in a highly publicized 1948 drug bust. Producers explicitly exploited Leeds' real-life legal troubles, marketing the film with taglines like, "See the actual dope party that sent her to jail." This blurring of fiction and reality outraged many, including Leeds herself, who later claimed she was pressured into making the film to avoid further legal problems. While ostensibly an anti-drug educational film, censors in multiple states banned it for its extensive scenes showing drug use and its effects. The film features surprisingly explicit depictions of marijuana parties, withdrawal symptoms, and implied sexual promiscuity. Despite, or because of, these bans, it became one of the most widely seen exploitation films of the era, continuing to play at midnight screenings well into the 1960s. The Sinister Urge, 1960. Ed Wood's final mainstream film before descending into adult cinema was this bizarre crime thriller about a detective investigating murders connected to the pornography industry. Though technically from 1960, it was filmed in 1959 and represents the culmination of 1950s exploitation tropes. The film's strange production involved Wood incorporating footage from an unfinished juvenile delinquent film called Hellborn, resulting in jarring tonal shifts and plot inconsistencies. Despite its anti-pornography message, the film itself contains numerous suggestive scenes that pushed the boundaries of the production code. One murder sequence was so graphic by 1950 standards that several projectionists cut it from the film themselves. The Catholic Legion of Decency condemned it, and it was banned in several cities, including Cincinnati and Boston. What particularly bothered censors was Wood's suggestion that seemingly respectable people secretly consumed pornography, implying widespread hypocrisy. Despite its poor reception, the film remains significant as both Wood's final mainstream work and as a transition point between the exploitation films of the 1950s and the more explicit cinema that would emerge in the following decade. Robot Monster, 1953. This sci-fi film became notorious for its laughably bad monster, a gorilla suit with a diving helmet, but its sexual content was what actually got it banned in several conservative states. The film follows Earth's last survivors after an alien invasion, focusing on a family with two young women who become objects of desire for the alien invader. Director Phil Tucker shot the film in 4 days on a budget of just $16,000, using Bronson Canyon for its alien landscape and hiring a friend in a gorilla costume when he couldn't afford actual special effects. What he lacked in budget, he made up for in suggestive content. Multiple scenes feature the female characters in revealing clothing being pursued by the monster, with clear sexual undertones. Religious groups condemned the film for bestiality themes, while several southern states banned it outright. Despite the controversy, it earned over $1 million at the box office, an incredible return on investment. The film's commercial success, despite its artistic failure, became a template for future exploitation filmmakers, proving that profitability didn't require quality, just controversy and titillation. Today, it's considered one of the so-bad-it's-good classics of sci-fi cinema. The shocking truth about these banned films isn't just what they showed, but what they revealed about the society trying to suppress them. From gender identity to female empowerment, these filmmakers pushed boundaries while authorities pushed back. Which of these forgotten shockers deserves a modern reassessment? Let us know in the comments below, and ask yourself, with today's anything goes content, have we become too desensitized to be truly shocked anymore? Or are these cinematic rebels still capable of making us uncomfortable in ways million-dollar studios never could?